Okay, so we're going to start with our IELTS listening practice. So hopefully you should have listened through to this already and you should have your answers on your answer sheet. So let's go through what the answers were. So questions 1 to 6, really quite easy. Hopefully shouldn't have given you too many problems. So we'll just go through it very quickly now. 2 people talking about a golf tournament. What's the number of the hole? That's what you're listening for. What was the difficulty? Were there any hazards or issues in it? And then what was the par? The only difficulty you might have with this section is if you've never watched golf before, like me, or if you hate golf, like I do. They use the word par a lot in their conversation, so you should be listening for that as your keyword. So the first hole is a par 3, talking about hole 1. Then the difficulty for hole 4, they say, is very difficult. Okay, so you should have put the very in there because you can hear them say that. So that was quite easy. And then the next one, number 3, he says it's kind of hilly, but simple. So you could have said hilly, or you could have said, you only want 2 words. So you couldn't really say a bit hilly. I mean, I think you could have put bit hilly, but simple. But the best answer would just be hilly but simple. Okay, and then it was par 3 as well for hole number 4. And then 11, there was an awful, and then they say water hazard. Okay, so David says, I remember it has an awful water hazard right at the beginning. Okay, so you're listening for our keywords here in awful and then water hazard. Okay, you might be caught out with the spelling a little bit here. They do count your spelling in the IELTS listening, so make sure that you're doing your best to practice writing vocabulary words, not just reading and memorizing, practicing writing them too, because you need to be able to spell them correctly. And then the last one is there are three sand bunkers or 3 sand traps. Okay, so they try to paraphrase bunkers with traps. I mean, that's a golf thing. I don't know how you're supposed to know it's a golf thing, but they say 3 sand something. So your answer here should be 3. Okay, so that section is relatively straightforward. Hopefully that shouldn't have caused you too many problems, but questions 7 to 10 were a little bit more tricky, so let's move on and talk about those a little bit. Okay, so now we're going to talk about questions 7 to 10. This conversation is actually, I find directions can be actually quite tricky to do in a listening, so it's worth practicing them a lot by yourself because there's easy points to pick up. But I think what is difficult for the people who make the IELTS test is they try to make the directions as confusing as possible, because in reality directions are quite simple to follow, but they try to make them kind of difficult to catch you out. So I actually think this conversation between Peter and David about where the golf tournament is, they've tried to make it very complicated for you. And so I'm going to take it through with you because it can be a little bit confusing and they're trying to trick you, okay? So the conversation starts, they've told you where Peter is. Peter is here, okay? So he actually says, so David asks, whereabout are you? Peter says, well, I'm not sure. I'm next to a post office and opposite the park, okay? So next to the post office, opposite the park. So I think that what they want you to say is he's opposite the park, so it should be A, where is the park? Okay, so the park should be A. Then Dave says, I think I know where you are. Is there a roundabout ahead of you? He says, yes, I can see a roundabout ahead. Now, was confusing to me as a British person, okay? What do you mean by roundabout? A roundabout is where we have 4 roads coming together and you can sort of drive around it like that. So it's called a roundabout because your car comes in and then you drive around and you exit, okay? It's to help the flow of traffic. So it's called a roundabout because it's supposed to be a circle, okay? So when I was first listening to this, I was confused because this is very much not a circle, okay? This is just a junction, okay? So we wouldn't necessarily have that as a roundabout because it's not round, okay? We would just call that a junction, okay? And I know you don't really tend to have roundabouts in Korea, but it's a very British thing that we tend to have. And part of the scariest part of taking driving lessons in the UK is learning how to go on a roundabout because there's no stopping, everyone just goes. And so when I was learning to drive, to go around a roundabout, you would always go, as you're driving around, because it can be quite scary to go on a really big one, because sometimes you can have multiple roads all feeding in and traffic going. So Peter says, yes, I can see a roundabout ahead. So I'm assuming Peter is here. He's looking ahead, okay? And I'm just using my common sense to guess that this is supposed to be a roundabout, okay? But it's in the diagram, it's not, okay? But we're going to have to assume that he wants him to go up here. David says, can you go right around the roundabout so you're facing the way you came? Okay, what does that literally mean? He literally wants Peter to go right. So he comes up to the roundabout, he wants him to turn right around the roundabout so you're facing the way you came. Okay, that's what that sentence literally means. If I'm driving, someone says, can you go right around the roundabout so you're facing the way you came? Okay, you want to go all the way around, okay, driving to the right and coming back the way you came. That's what the sentence literally says. But that can't make any sense, right? Because then he's just going backwards. So it doesn't make any sense, okay? So in terms of question A, which way should he turn? He should turn right. Okay, so the answer should be he should turn right. But he should turn, so what they want to actually say is, can you turn right at the roundabout and take the second exit? So in the UK, so I'll redraw this because it's a little bit confusing. The roundabout looks like this. You're driving up the road and we label all the exits. So if I'm on this road, we would call this exit 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so if I was giving directions to my sister, I'd say, okay, up here at the roundabout, go right, take the third exit. So that means I'm going to go right round and take the third exit. Okay, it's kind of confusing, I know. When we say, if we want to say go left at the roundabout, it literally means coming off like this, or that just means take the first exit. So that's how we give directions for a roundabout, okay? If I was directing my sister driving in the car, I would say take the second exit, take the third exit, go right and take the third exit, you know? So we don't tend to really use, you know, left and right too much. We tend to talk in terms of not the number of exits, okay? So if you come to a really big roundabout, you might say take the fourth or take the fifth exit on the roundabout, okay? So as you're driving around, you're counting off 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm going off at this one. So they're kind of, this question is confusing a junction where you literally turn right and a roundabout where you take an exit. Okay, so that's just a British thing. That's just a British thing about how we drive and how we give directions. So it's quite tricky, and it's quite tricky to listen to, and it's quite difficult if you've never driven in the UK to understand what that means. So they say in the conversation, can you go right around the roundabout? So literally in the conversation, they're asking you to be here. Okay, but that's impossible, because then the next direction is that go on that road until you reach some traffic lights, which I guess is here, and then you need to turn right or at a junction. Okay, so if we did this, the next set of directions literally make no sense. So you have to assume as the candidate taking the exam that when he says go and turn right, he literally wants you to come here. Okay, so this is where Peter is now ended up. This is where they want you to be, but the directions they've given you are kind of confusing. Okay, so he's at the junction. The next set of directions is, David says, go on that road until you reach some traffic lights. Okay, so that's how I know he's supposed to be here, because this is the second set of traffic lights. At the lights, you need to turn right. Okay, so he's saying you need to turn right, which would be this way. Okay, so if we're thinking I'm Peter, this is my left hand and this is my right hand. Okay, you've got to think in terms of where he's facing. He's facing this way, and this is going to be right. So you need to turn right. And then he says, if you turn left at that junction, okay, you can see a big crop storage area on your left. Okay, so what did he literally say? He said, if you turn left at that junction. Okay, so he's still talking about the same junction. Okay, so you go on that road until you reach some traffic lights. At the lights, you need to turn right. You need to turn right. Okay, so this is what's confusing. He's given me the direction. At the lights, you need to turn right. So he's telling me to go this way towards G and F, okay? But his next sentence says, if you turn left at that junction, you can see a big crop storage area on your left, okay? The key word here is that junction. So he's still referring to the previous junction, okay? This one, this is the one he's referring to. If you turn left, he's giving me a hypothetical. If you turn left at that junction, okay? Which means that if I go left, okay, I will see a big crop storage area on your left, okay? So if I'm driving this way, I'm looking this way, this is going to be my left. My crop storage area is H. Where is the crop storage area? It should be H. That's what they want, okay? But then he says, the golf course is across from it. Okay, across means opposite. But he's still talking about the crop storage area. You see a big crop storage area here. The golf course is across from it. So kind of like across, kind of opposite. So I'm guessing that they want the golf course to be I. Okay, that's literally what the directions say. But I think that the feeling is that they're trying to confuse you, make you think it's G and F. Okay, but then it doesn't make sense, because then why is David telling me I need to turn right? Okay. So I think what the original plan is that you should have come up here and the crop storage area was supposed to be F, and then the golf course was supposed to be G. Okay, but the conversation, literally the conversation that they had, it doesn't make sense. Okay, and it's because we've got a referencing issue here. Okay, so if he said at the lights you need to turn right. If you turn left at that junction, you see the crop storage area, but don't turn left, turn right, and you'll see the golf storage area on your right. If you see the golf course on your right, then the answer would be G, okay? But this should be the answers. From what they literally said in the conversation, the park is A, he should turn right at the roundabout, the crop storage area is H, and then that means the golf course has to be I. But the conversation is actually quite confusing, okay? And I wouldn't blame you if you put different answers, okay? Because I feel like when they made the map, they wanted the golf course to be G and the crop storage area to be F, okay? But in writing the conversation, they tried to make it a little bit confusing, and so it's kind of they've made it kind of difficult to follow the directions. If I was Peter, I would be kind of angry because David is not giving me good directions. If I was literally Peter driving, I would probably have gotten lost too, and I would be kind of angry that David couldn't give me normal directions, okay? But this is a good chance to familiarize yourself with UK driving instructions, especially roundabouts, because that might not be something you're familiar with. They don't tend to have roundabouts in America, only junctions. So roundabouts is a good thing to think about in terms of taking exits and sort of driving around it, okay? So even though this question was a little bit confusing, I totally understand if you missed a couple. If I think I was listening to this conversation, I would find it confusing because I think it's a little bit off. But yeah, okay, so let's move on to section 2.